When they've reached a point where, it's grandma's secret. There are certain things that it's important for you to step out and allow them to have their own space and their own time. My name's Donna Pacheco. We're here on Pacheco Dairy and Oshedinya Cheese Company. We're a family farm. My father-in-law started here in 1969, and my husband gradually took it over in 1980, and we've gone through a lot of different progressions. We've milked cows, went to goats, and we've slowly incorporated cow's milk. Our days usually start about 3:15. That's with my boys getting up and milking cows. And then they gradually go over and they start milking the goats. It's in the same barn, just on one side. The cows are on one side and the goats are on the other. That point is the kids will in turn go inside the barn. When the goats and the cows, when they're done being milked, they'll go out into the fields in the morning after they're milking. And then the boys, my sons, will go inside the barn and lay out feed. And so we do feed alfalfa and brewer's grain, and so they'll feed that inside the barns, and then they go to school. After school they come home, they make sure that the cows have enough hay in front of them, and then we start the whole process all over again. We start milking, and there's variables. A lot of times when the kids get home from school, I'm waving, get a hairnet, let's go, because I'll need help stirring, or I need them to reach something that I can't reach, and so I incorporate them. My two middle boys certainly know how to make cheese. I'm hoping, that they want to stay on the farm and carry this on. But all of our kids do farmers markets. They're all a big part of those day-to-day things. They load vans, they unload vans, they count cheese, they wrap cheese, they cut cheese, they do quite a bit of that. And it's just whatever needs to be done. There's always something that needs to be done. There's no way we could do this without our kids. It really is a combination of everything. We rent out pasture to our neighbor that has beef cows. We rent out, if somebody wants to come and rent the plant for the day, we would absolutely do that. We rent out our shop. We do cheese making classes. We do tours. We rent out 2 apartments on the property. It's a farm. You have to utilize everything. We make soap. Everything that we can do, everything's a value-added process. It's a farm. We're certainly not rolling in the dough with just the farm. It's in combination of everything, and we really are very fortunate to have all of those different things come into play so that we can make our payments. When we rent out our facilities, it's a set fee because it's a set amount of propane. It's a set amount of time. My staff, that is a requirement, is that my staff has to do the pasteurization so that I know that it's done properly, so that we're preserving as much water as possible, especially in a year like this. So there's always, my crew is always going to be a part of that, and certainly there are different times, and it's advertised on our guild, on the California Cheese Guild, and it's just all inclusive. But when they've reached a point where it's grandma's secret, there are certain things that it's important for you to step out and allow them to have their own space and their own time to make those secrets and make those recipes happen. The drought has affected not only the prices of the cheeses, but also the flavor in the cheese itself. It is all about what the animals are eating that comes through in the flavors of the cheese. So You know, usually we have pasture 8 months out of the year. This year we had it for about 2 months, and it really didn't have time to come to its maturity. And so I love it when they're eating green pasture. You can taste the sweetness on the curds. We just didn't really get that this year. And so there's lots of things, you know, it is a trickle down effect. My son usually raises all of his young cows as replacements into the herd. Well, he had to sell all of his replacements because we couldn't justify feeding them for another 1.5 years before they would be introduced to the herd. And the disadvantage in that is that you lose your breeding. You know, when an animal is born and raised on this property, it's born with immunities to the bacteria that are here. And so, you know, it's a huge, huge production. You know, it's a big difference. So it's been a tough year. So we do have a vet that comes out once a year. Basically, it's important to have the vet come through because they may see something that we don't see. And so it's just kind of go through, they'll take a couple of samples, blood samples, just to kind of, you know, make sure that they're generally healthy. Because most of our animals are born and raised here on the property, they have their own immunities right off the bat. They've developed the immunity so that we generally don't need to use antibiotics. We don't need to treat them often because they're just naturally immune to what's going on here, which I love. You know, it's nice to not have to give them antibiotics and treat them. And so what I've started to do is I've taken, which caught me onto it, and so I've taken the bacteria that's in kombucha and put it in the whey trough so that when the whey is pumped up there, the bacteria will eat the sugars out of the whey and then produces that digestive enzymes, those probiotics. And so that's one of those things that are important. If your stomach's good, you're good. And so, you know, it's just kind of, I may not be skinny, but I'm healthy. And so, you know, it's one of those things. And I feel the same way about our animals, as if we're proactive, we don't have to treat them. They definitely develop their own digestive enzymes, and the brewer's grain is fermented, so that fermentation is easy for them to digest as well. So all of those things, if you feed them well, they give us good milk and they're healthy. What we noticed is that our goats were living 3 years longer after we stopped feeding them corn. And so, you know, it's another one of those things. It's feeding them something that they can naturally digest. What had happened in the state of California is the dairy industry had flooded the market with cow's milk. And so for us, what we opted to do was start milking goats because there was much more of a demand for the goat's milk. And so we got into it and we built up our herd. We started out with 400 goats and worked up to 1,800 goats. And then basically the same thing happened. So the reason why we started to make cheese is because we needed to figure out how to sustain this family farm. And so, you know, this is what we see with a lot of people. There's a lot of people that are starting, you know, backyard farms, and you have to have at least 2 goats. You can't have just 1 goat because they are herd animals. They need attention. They need their group, and they do incorporate other creatures, but you know, 2 goats need goats, and so you can absolutely start that in the backyard. And I talk to hundreds of people a year, you know, that have a couple of goats and they hand milk them, and then they'll progress, and then you can only collect the milk up to 4 days because you want to make sure that the milk is fresh. So after 4 days, they collect that milk and they're making cheese in their house. It's very popular. It's very in demand, and goats' cheeses are not those gamey, goaty cheeses anymore. We know how to handle the milk so much better. Family farm, and as I spoke, we do a number of things to sustain the farm. One of the things that we do are tours. We do tours at least 4 days a week, and our tours are about an hour and a half. I give a lot of information. I want people to walk away knowing who we are and knowing what we do on a regular basis. And I talk about the breeds of animals and their personalities that go with it, and that an animal may appear to be skinny, but really they're bred. It's kind of like a race dog. You know, people always look at the racing dogs and say feed them, but dairy animals tend to not develop muscle. They're bred to produce milk. And so what happens is gravity, God love it, pulls down, and you can see their stomachs are quite full and their udders are full, but you can see their backbone and their hip bones. Well, that's a part of their breed. That's how they're bred. And so I want people to walk away knowing those kind of things when they see an animal in the field and a thought. I want them to go away with the information. www.ashadinya.com will get you to me. It's always best to do internet so that I can respond to you at 4 o'clock in the morning or 11 o'clock at night.
And she's very good at that.
I'm good with that. So phone calls, I'm horrible, but yeah, we encourage people to come out and have tours. So.
Donna and I have known each other for many years through working together with our guild, the California Artisan Cheese Guild. It is we're both of us are members, and as cheesemakers,